As I stated earlier, we're in the 6th week of our 12-week study. We began with a look at the jhana meditation technique. The next week we looked at the 4 foundations of mindfulness, where the Buddha establishes those as our meditation practice in the beginning of the Satipatthana Sutta. And we just did that. We became mindful of our breath and our bodies as feelings arose. We recognized those feelings as impermanent and came back to our breath, and the feelings arose and passed away. We did the same thing with our thoughts, the 3rd foundation of mindfulness. And that charge at the last, notice the quality of your mind, be at peace with your mind, is the 4th foundation of mindfulness. When we are dispassionately mindful in a continuous fashion of feelings and thoughts arising and passing away, we are able to maintain concentration in this present moment. That's called refined mindfulness. That type of refined mindfulness then allows us to hold in mind the entire Eightfold Path as our path for practice, as our path for liberation. The next week we looked at the 4 Noble Truths. The 4 Noble Truths are the entire context for everything the Buddha taught. One of the reasons why that's important is if we become confused about what the Buddha taught and what he didn't teach, is if it doesn't relate directly to 4 Noble Truths, it's not a Dhamma practice that the Buddha taught. The reason why the 4 Noble Truths are called noble primarily, I won't get into the royalty aspect of it, is that they relate to the Dhamma. There's 4 truths that relate to the Dhamma and no other truths. And the significance of that is it's true that the sky is blue. It's true that my dog's name is Bodhi. It's true that Lorna's hair is shorter, but not as short as mine. Those are all truth. But they're not noble truth. And why? Because they don't relate to the Dhamma. So we can get distracted by, why does Lorna have short hair but not as short as mine? Why did I name my dog Bodhi? Why didn't I name an endless list of whys and wheres and how comes that have nothing at all to do with the Dhamma. But when we start creating practices over something that we think is significant to maintain a fabricated view, a false view rooted in ignorance of 4 Noble Truths, then we've lost the Dhamma. And we talk a lot about that. So the Dhamma is very simple. It's also very specific. And that understanding of the context of 4 Noble Truths began with a simple acceptance that as a consequence of having a human life, dukkha will occur, meaning stress or suffering will occur. And then we learned as a 2nd Noble Truth that it's craving for views rooted in ignorance of 4 Noble Truths, to establish myself in the world based on those views and then clinging to the views. Craving for and clinging to fabricated views is the origination of stress and suffering. The 3rd Noble Truth is that the cessation of that self-induced process is possible. And that 3rd Noble Truth can easily be overlooked until you understand that it's speaking directly to a core theme of the Dhamma that we looked at in depth in our structured study of Vipassana. Everything is impermanent, including the Dhamma, by the way. So established in that impermanence is an aspect of stress and suffering. It's an aspect of confusion and delusion. Gives us the ability and the license to actually recognize and abandon this self-induced process that keeps us rooted in greed, aversion, and deluded thinking. And that is the 4th Noble Truth, the truth of the path, the Eightfold Path, leading to the cessation of this initial ignorance. And that leads us to the beginning factors of the Eightfold Path. So we started 2 weeks ago with looking at the wisdom factors of right view and right intention. Initial right view is an opening to the 4 Noble Truths, meaning that it is a view that it is the beginning of accepting that I don't understand these 4 Noble Truths. And I want to learn them. That's the beginning of right view. We can call that mundane right view. Super mundane right view or awakened right view is a view that completely understands the nature of stress and has abandoned all individual contributions to stress. The 2nd factor of the Eightfold Path and the 2nd wisdom factor is right intention. So right intention follows the 2nd Noble Truth. It is my intention, the reason why I'm involved in Dhamma practice, the reason why we're all here tonight, is to find a way, to find a method to recognize and abandon craving for and clinging to false views rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths. Makes sense. It follows the second noble truth, doesn't it? And that leads us to what we studied last week, the what might be called the virtuous factors or the moral or ethical factors of the Eightfold Path of right speech, right action, and right livelihood. And we found that the Buddha taught those not as in a religious aspect, meaning for strict morality, but as a key to what's occurring within our minds. Ultimately, the Buddha's Dhamma resolves within our minds as our minds are in this present moment, meaning that no matter how rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths we are, the Buddha's Dhamma can meet us there. And if practiced diligently in the way it's intended, can take us from whatever point we are to an awakened human being. Right speech, right action, or right livelihood, when held in mind, when being mindful of these, immediately show us what's occurring in our mind and the quality of our mind. And again, there's 2 talks on that. If you didn't hear the second talk, I encourage you to listen to it and maybe even listen to it again. And that leads us now to the concentration factors of the Eightfold Path. The concentration factors of the Eightfold Path, right effort, right mindfulness, and right meditation, are the 3 factors that follow those first 5. And it's the first 5 factors that support deepening concentration. And it's the last 3 factors that support the integration and the application of the concentration developed through a right practice. Let me read the. How many of you read the portion in the book on the 6th week? Really? How'd you know?
I read it online.
Very good. Okay, so everybody read it. All right. The Eightfold Path, heightened concentration, right effort, right mindfulness, and right meditation. The Eightfold Path is the Buddha's framework for developing understanding, leading to the cessation of stress. It is a path that develops heightened wisdom, heightened virtue, and heightened concentration, or heightened samadhi. Samadhi is just a Pali word that means non-distraction or a well-concentrated mind. I will use the word concentration to describe samadhi as it is more accepted in this context. Heightened wisdom is developed within the framework of the Eightfold Path with right view and right intention. Initially, mundane wisdom inspires the mind to understand the validity and authenticity of the Four Noble Truths. This is a turning point in the ongoing distraction of unhappiness and stress. A mind that has developed the mundane understanding that its view has been confused and distracted by its own clinging and craving can now develop wisdom and right view. I mentioned that earlier. The Buddha's Dhamma is designed to meet us where we are, no matter where we are. It's not something that teaches us that we need to achieve some kind of fabricated future state before we'll be bestowed with awakening. Of course, everything like that's what much of modern Buddhism is presented that way, and it completely contradicts what the Buddha taught. The reason why we use jhana meditation is because that's the initial counter to a human being who has lost its mind, meaning that my mind is out of my body. I'm stuck in the past or I'm stuck in the future. Using jhana practice, the only meditation the Buddha taught, as soon as we engage in jhana, in that meditation method, as soon as we sit down on our cushion and take a breath and abandon being distracted by our thoughts, in that moment, we have united our mind and our bodies. For most of us, in the beginning of practice, we'll lose our minds again. We'll start thinking about our thoughts. We'll be distracted by our thoughts and our feelings. This, again, relates to those 4 foundations of mindfulness and the simple instruction the Buddha taught to what to do in meditation. When we find that we're caught up in our thoughts again, when we find that we've lost our mind, we take a breath and it unites the mind back in the body. And that's the basic practice. That's why it's called practice. Every single time we do that in meditation, we're deepening concentration. And the reason why that's so important is because that helps to encourage our Dhamma practice rather than discourage it. If we're constantly focused on the results, meaning, well, I'm here to meditate and I cannot be focused on my thoughts. If my thoughts come up, I'm doing it wrong. You're not doing it wrong. If you find that you're caught up in your thoughts, you're doing it right, especially when you remember to come back to the sensation of breathing. Jhana meditation, right concentration, includes both of those components. And both of those components never change, by the way. An awakened human being still deals with thoughts arising and passing away. It's simply of no consequence. We remain mindful of our breath. Lorna described it beautifully a few times in a few different ways, but one was that she sees being mindful of your breath, jhana meditation, as your breath is up here and your thoughts are flowing down here. That's such a perfect description. Jhana meditation, or the meditation that the Buddha taught, is not to develop a trance-like state. If the purpose of meditation is true vipassana, there can be no vipassana, meaning true introspective insight, if our minds are a blank slate, if we're living in a trance. It simply can't happen. And of course, the Buddha didn't teach that. But most meditation methods, in one way or another, are designed to develop a trance-like state, whether it's to think about a flower or a flame or a deity, or to use a mantra, or to use the idea of establishing myself in some future state. Those are all trance-like states, aren't they? But it's the same trance-like state, whether it's manufactured and fabricated in this moment, or the ongoing trance-like state of living in ignorance of Four Noble Truths. We had a little discussion on that. The Buddha taught that living in ignorance of Four Noble Truths is like a living death. And so the eternity that the Buddha taught is eternity right now, meaning becoming fully alive by abandoning ignorance of Four Noble Truths, so that we can actually live our life as our life unfolds, so that we can reunite our mind in our body and be mindfully present for life as life unfolds without the need for it to be any different than it is. That's an awakened human being. And it's entirely possible to develop that through the Eightfold Path. This same mind can begin the process of abandoning all causes of confusion and distraction, all causes of stress and unhappiness. From right view, right intention develops. Right intention is being mindful of abandoning all causes of stress. Being mindful of the intention to abandon craving and clinging leads to the development of the virtuous factors of the Eightfold Path. Being mindful of and abandoning all that is not right speech, right action, and right livelihood develops useful mindfulness of craving and clinging. Being mindful to maintain right speech, right action, and right livelihood develops the ability to diminish and finally abandon craving and clinging. And again, remember, this is craving for and clinging to those fabricated views rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths. The wrong views I've created about myself in relation to the world I live in. As clinging begins to diminish, a practice of developing heightened concentration then becomes effective. Right effort is the first of these three factors of heightened concentration. Right effort. Right effort is generating the skillful desire and actions and diligence to avoid inappropriate thoughts, words, and deeds that have yet arisen. It simply means a little bit of an archaic way of putting it, but it simply means that I now know what I need to be mindful of, and I'm going to maintain this well-concentrated and refined mindfulness to recognize when an unskillful thought arises to simply immediately abandon it. This is a teaching that the Buddha gave 2,600 years ago, but it's incredibly relevant to today, and a compulsive need to analyze each and every thought. I mean, we're almost taught that from birth, that we should grasp onto and analyze each and every thought or thought construct that we have to try to get to the root of its meaning. Why is this thing bothering me? Or why am I so focused on it? The Buddha teaches that's just more distraction, isn't it? You can never get to the root cause of anything that is rooted in ignorance, because the root cause is ignorance. And so when we recognize that we're distracted by an unskillful thought that has arisen, we simply take a breath and reunite our mind and our body. And that's all we do with it. And we do that both on our cushion and off our cushion. Each time we do it, we're deepening concentration and we're diminishing ignorance. Right effort is abandoning inappropriate thoughts, words, and deeds that have arisen. Again, it just means to be mindful. When I find myself thinking about an argument that I might have had this afternoon, and I'm continuing the argument in my mind and continuing to call the person such and such in my mind, or trying to elevate myself or make myself right and the other person wrong. All these things we do in our mind. We get stuck in our thoughts about ourselves and maintaining ourselves. When we find that we're doing anything like that, we simply recognize it and come back to the sensation of breathing. Again, there's no analysis of why we're doing it. In fact, the foolishness of that, looking at that within the framework of the Eightfold Path, shows the foolishness of that. What's important is to recognize I'm distracted in this moment. My mind is agitated. There's not a why or a wherefore. The Dhamma teaches is just to acknowledge that. That's what's occurring in this moment. And what do I want in this moment? I want a peaceful and calm mind that is united, and that mind united in my body. I take a breath. And I begin to frame my thoughts, my words, and my deeds by the Eightfold Path. Right effort is developing appropriate thoughts, words, and deeds that have yet arisen. How is that done? Developing appropriate thoughts, words, and deeds that have yet arisen. It's done within the framework of the Eightfold Path. And learning what is appropriate. And we've had so many talks. What is appropriate to hold in mind? What is appropriate to recognize and abandon? What is appropriate to hold in mind is anything that relates to Four Noble Truths and is described in the Eightfold Path. And what is inappropriate is anything else. Anything that is distracting or disturbing or used for continuing anatta, continuing the five clinging aggregates, continuing wrong views of self. Right view emphasizes the importance of abandoning non-virtuous acts. Being mindful of right view brings understanding that it is by strong attachment to the ego personality that non-virtuous acts occur. There's a simple component of this as to why it's important to recognize and abandon unskillful and hurtful behavior. And it's just this: if I'm still engaged in behavior that is rooted in continued I-making and reacting from that point of view of ignorance, and I'm continuing to cause harm to myself and others, it might be a direct harm, or it might be simply a harm caused by further distraction that I'm causing in the world. If my mind is still like that and I'm not addressing it in any way, my mind will simply be too agitated to even hope to develop concentration. And that's why we don't start with a concentration factor and then decide, well, I'm going to do this for 6 months. And then when I get concentration down, then I'll start looking at the other factors. It's a cohesive path. And it's a cohesive path that in its entirety begins with the beginning of Dhamma practice, just like we do here. It doesn't mean that the first time we hear the Eightfold Path, we're going to develop it fully and be awakened. It simply means that as we start our Dhamma practice, we gradually incorporate all 8 factors. As our concentration increases, we're able to do that more effectively. As current non-virtuous behavior is abandoned, virtuous behavior can be further developed. Through mindful awareness of what is to be developed and what is to be abandoned, appropriate thoughts, words, and deeds are now the foundation for continued right effort. A lot of our classes here are about just that: what to focus on and what to abandon. You heard me say this very often. The Buddha spent nearly as much time teaching what his Dhamma wasn't as teaching what it was, because that's such an important part of recognizing ignorance. Because a mind rooted in ignorance can't recognize its own ignorance, can it? That's the nature of ignorance. And how would a deluded mind know that it's deluded unless it had a framework for recognizing this is delusion and that's not? This is a specific application of mindfulness that is developed and maintained in the Dhamma. Being mindful of what is to be abandoned and what is to be developed is the essence of right mindfulness. So the Buddha taught a very specific application of mindfulness that has very little to do with the modern mindfulness movement. Most of the modern mindfulness movement has developed a type of worshipful religion over the word mindfulness and the application of mindfulness. And it really just leads to more distraction. It could be called mindless mindfulness. The Buddha taught a very specific application of mindfulness, which is to be mindful of the Eightfold Path. And this mindfulness means to recollect or to hold in mind. It means as Dhamma practitioners, we develop the ability to hold in mind and to recollect when appropriate the entire Eightfold Path. And then the Eightfold Path becomes the entire framework for our life. For those that have yet to develop that sounds probably too abstract to even have much meaning. But that's the purpose of the Dhamma practice. The Buddha used this word ehipassiko, which means come and see for yourself. What the Buddha means by that is you have to, in order to understand this Dhamma, you have to actually experience it. You can listen to all the talks from me or the Buddha or anyone else. We have 4 new teachers now here. There's one of them right there. You can listen to all the talks or all the tapes and read all the suttas that you want. But if you don't actually apply the Dhamma, there is no Dhamma. It has to be directly experienced. One of the interesting things, we had a couple of talks, we didn't actually go there, we have some talks about different teachers. There's some amazingly brilliant teachers that have written entire volumes on the suttas as the Buddha teaches them, yet they didn't learn anything from the suttas. You can tell that from the commentary, because they didn't actually apply it themselves. It was an intellectual process. So you can memorize all the suttas the Buddha ever gave. It's not going to do you any good. You have to have this direct experience. But the Buddha's Dhamma, when engaged in, getting back to right effort, when engaged in right effort, will naturally produce a direct experience of the Dhamma. Everything that is needed to awaken through the Eightfold Path is included in the Eightfold Path. The problem is when we start adapting, accommodating, or deleting certain aspects, or creating a meditation or mind-only Yogacara type of Dhamma practice that the Buddha never taught. Right effort is one factor of 8 in developing the path of liberation and freedom from this confusion and stress. It is part of a cohesive method of understanding the 4 noble truths. Dhamma practice begins at the point of accepting the first noble truth, the truth of unhappiness and stress. From this initial right view, acceptance of the necessity to change views becomes apparent to continue the Eightfold Path. And that really is the most difficult aspect of the path, excuse me. Because a mind rooted in ignorance of itself and of 4 noble truths will cling compulsively and tenaciously to those views, it becomes entirely necessary to have a framework and a supportive structure and the encouragement of knowing that a human being actually, this is why it's important to maintain an authentic view of Dhamma practice too, to understand that a human being actually did this. This is taking true refuge now. A human being actually did this. And that human being actually left his Dhamma for explaining exactly how he did it so that we can do the same. And that third refuge that we are so fortunate to have, a well-informed and well-focused sangha. All 3 of those are necessary to overcome a mind rooted in ignorance and compulsed to ignore that ignorance. That's the great breakthrough that the Buddha described in the Nagara Sutta. It's what kept him stuck in that feedback loop that he described in that sutta. And it wasn't until he recognized that component of it that he was able to extricate himself. In other words, excuse me, the component of ignorance, the nature of ignorance to ignore its own ignorance. It's the same thing as saying a mind rooted in delusion has no way to recognize it's deluded unless you have some outside agency. In the mundane world, that outside agency might be a good therapist that's able to direct you and show you that your thinking is off here and there. The Dhamma takes that in a much deeper level, and I should say it's not a substitute for therapy. I'm not telling people if you need therapy, go to therapy, but it's different, and it's a different application, and it's much more deeper and profound than any therapy can ever be. Again, just to say it for the 3rd time today, if you're in therapy and you find it useful, please continue. I'm not trying to talk people into get away from therapy. That's dangerous. But the Dhamma can resolve any mental issue that anybody has, because it gets to the heart of all stress, all confused thinking. It gets to the heart of it, ignorance of 4 noble truths. Right intention follows to bring to mind the resistance to changing views that conditioned thinking maintains. It takes a mindful determination to overcome the effects of confusion and distraction that the ego personality has developed. Right effort will develop the qualities needed for liberation from stress and unhappiness. Engaging in Dhamma practice should not lead to harsh judgments on past behavior. It's one of the reasons why you hear me say, probably every class, that to be very, very gentle with yourself. And those new here tonight, Dhamma practice cannot be developed unless we can develop that important characteristic within ourselves, to be very gentle with ourselves. Because if we're judging ourselves harshly or judging the practice itself harshly at any time, we are not developing the Dhamma at that point, and we'll likely talk ourselves out of just giving it up. Because judging myself harshly or the Dhamma harshly in this moment is what? It's the essence of I-making. Thinking that everybody else out there can develop the Dhamma, but it just doesn't seem to work for me, is the essence of a self-centered thought, isn't it? A self-referential thought. The reason why taking true refuge, as I described it before, taking refuge in a human Buddha, his human Dhamma, and a well-focused sangha, is because it gets us past that terminal uniqueness that every mind rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths believes in. I am different than everyone else. In fact, it's the nature of anatta to continue to establish its difference, isn't it? A mind rooted in ignorance has to maintain a difference in its own mind, a fabricated difference. And I don't want to go there. It'd be an interesting thing, but we go too long. Just to say it. It's the fact. It's the. I can't let go. I cling to these things, and I crave to teach them. It's a mind rooted in that fabricated distinction that it is completely unique, that has created its own isolation in the world. Everybody follow me so far? And because of that, because I have created myself in myself a scenario for living, that I have now isolated myself from everything else in the world, because of my ignorance, because of my terminal uniqueness, that I now have to fabricate so-called dharmas that overcompensate for that and create this one world clinging, one consciousness, singular view. That's how we ended up in that fabricated view that the Buddha never taught, that we're all of one mind and we're all of one substance. The Buddha taught to see the uniqueness in everything, but not the uniqueness in ourselves. He taught us to see ourselves as completely ordinary, six-propertied individuals. Every human being is made up of the four elements, earth, wind, fire, water. The fifth property of space, earth, wind, fire, and water needs space to manifest in, doesn't it? If there wasn't space, we wouldn't be able to breathe. There wouldn't be a space in our mouth, or we wouldn't be able to hear or see. That's the space property. It allows for manifestations of the five clinging aggregates and the sixth property of consciousness, ongoing thinking rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths. That describes every human being, those six properties. And every human being, no matter how hard they try, and no matter how much they accomplish and how much they acquire, no matter how big the pile of gold is that they have, or the pile of coconuts they have in their hut back in the day, cannot change those six properties. So why keep trying? Why do we spend our entire lives trying to get more coconuts than everyone else? Because we think we need to do that to establish ourselves. Because once I am terminally unique, I have to be better than you, or something's wrong. And when I can recognize that ongoing process, when I describe it that way, it sounds like it's almost insurmountable, doesn't it? This thing that we created, this me. But it's like foam on the ocean. There's no substance to it. And once we recognize it, once we shine a light of understanding on these fabricated views, poof, they're gone. And that's why when we try to analyze it or use Vipassana in an unstructured way, it's lost. We're just clinging. We're continuing to distract ourselves through a so-called Dharma practice rather than using a Buddha's Dhamma to recognize and abandon that process. Engaging in Dhamma practice should not lead to harsh judgments on past behavior. With the perspective of right view, right effort is an intentional change in the way one's thoughts, words, and deeds affect development of understanding. Excuse me. Check the time. Right effort is the mindful turning point from conditioned reaction to the people and events of life to being mindfully and dispassionately present with what is occurring. And every time we do that, every time we remember that we're caught up in our thoughts, every time we recognize I'm making in this moment or taking things personally and come back to the sensation of breathing, we are practicing right effort and its concomitant right mindfulness in that moment. And as you've heard me say over and over again, that there is no Dhamma in the past, excuse me, and there's no Dhamma in the future. The only Dhamma we can ever hope to develop is right here in this present moment. The only time we can develop the moment, the Dhamma, is when our minds is united in our bodies. And as we started to, I'm going to ask this question, as you all started developing the Dhamma, you found yourself able to maintain that type of refined mindfulness, a mind united in your body for ever increasing periods of time, correct? Mm-hmm. Does anybody feel that you haven't been able to do that? Does anybody miss how remarkable that is? To be able to use this simple method to unite your mind and your body? I think it's one of the most remarkable things I've ever come across, because for many years I was looking for a way to do it, and all of those methods just encouraged me to stay out of my body. And the Buddha taught this simple method with the understanding that what I'm feeling and what thoughts are arising are not me. They're not mine. They're not what I am. And when I find that I'm caught up in my thoughts, I simply remind myself, take a breath. It's the essence of being gentle with myself too, isn't it? Is to take a breath, disentangle myself with whatever's distracting me, come back to the sensation of breathing and be at peace. And that peace is what's always there for us. That inner peace, that inner poise, we talked a lot about this. One of the things that was so remarkable about our 4 new teachers and what they taught over the weekend is the inner poise that they've all developed. It came through their teaching. That's what the Dhamma develops with us. Another word for that would be this inner assuredness that is developed through the Eightfold Path. Without an Eightfold Path, none of us can help but not be hurtful at times to people. And no human being wants that, unless you're a true psychopath, and it's very rare. And I'm not joking about that. True psychopath is very rare. But we all engage in hurtful behavior at times because of our minds rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths. And no one wants to do that. And we start creating almost like a PTSD, a stress response, when we find that we've hurt people, especially people that we care about. And even though it's inadvertent, that itself starts creating an inner tension that we don't want to do it again, but now we're on guard against our own behavior. Is everybody following me? Mm-hmm. And this is an inner tension. This is the most profound component of this inner stress that medical science has now found in the last 30 years. It's literally what kills us. And it's that initial reaction that I might screw up in the next moment, whether we realize it or not, that maintains that tension. And when we start developing the Eightfold Path, especially the moral and ethical components, the virtuous factors that we looked at last week, and realize it now for the first time in my life. And I can remember very clearly when I had this realization that for the first time in my life, I think I'm in control of my thoughts, my words, and my deeds. When you finally realize that, and I think a lot of you have had that experience, it does give you that inner poise that I can now remain harmless to myself and to others. And all of that stress and tension that is part of that initial reaction that we formed the first time we hurt ourselves and others simply vanishes. That's when Dhamma practice really takes off. When we're not carrying any baggage of that self that we fabricated through the Dhamma. Let it go. All those things that conditioned me to be something that I was very unhappy with, I use the phrase again, are like foam on the ocean. Even though I made it, I worshipped it, I insisted it was me, and I clung to it like for all get out. When I finally realized that I'm the one that made it, I'm the one that fabricated it, I'm the one that can let it go, then I can let it go. It takes profound responsibility that is only developed, at least as far as I know, through the Eightfold Path, through this passionate way of looking at my thoughts, words, and my deeds, whether they're rooted in ignorance or now developing in wisdom. Now that I can see them, I know what I can continue to nurture, what's skillful, and I know what there is to abandon. It's the essence of right effort. Let me just go a little bit further. Right effort develops a mindful and skillful presence arising from developing wisdom. A mindful and dispassionate quality of mind is not aloof disengagement from the people and events of life. A lot of people, when they first come to Dhamma practice and they hear that we need to let go of all self-referential views of self in order to develop the Dhamma, that sounds like annihilation. And it sounds like we're moving to this aloof detachment from life. Because a mind rooted in ignorance of Four Noble Truths cannot see itself living in the world without that mind. And so when it starts looking at letting go of all these views, it does feel like annihilation. It feels like there'll be nothing left to have a presence in the world. Where am I going to be? Well, those of us that have developed it, even just a little bit, understand that now you are actually mindfully present for your life as your life occurs. For the first time in your life, you are able to live your life and be mindful of what's occurring without the need to color it in any way based on what you want it to be or what you hope it to be. It's simply life as life occurs. And in that way, no matter what is occurring, it's meaningful. And it's meaningful because you're living it. You're having the experience of it. You're mindful of it. So even something that in the past might have been so upsetting that you couldn't even deal with it, you are now able to stay with it and be mindfully present, no matter what it is, no matter what occurs. You're simply seeing it in relation to the first noble truth and the rest of the four truths. We'll continue just a little bit more. This passionate mindfulness is being fully present with whatever arises without discriminating thought, including clinging, avoidance, or aversion. The Eightfold Path is not a sequential training, beginning at right view and ending at right meditation. The foundation of understanding begins with right view and progresses through the 7 factors. As understanding develops, all 8 factors of the Eightfold Path are integrated as Dhamma practice. I'm going to stop there. I think that's about halfway through. Let's start online. 1 second. Oh no. I think I just lost it. I think I lost the minute. Ah, there it is. I thought I lost you all. Jane, how are you tonight?
How are you?
Jane?
Can you hear me now? John?
Hello, Jane.
Hi, John.
Jane, do you hear me?
I hear you. Do you hear me?
Thad? Hello, Thad.
Yeah, John, I hear you, and Jane hears you too. You might be having some trouble at your end.
Thad and Jane, if you hear me, just speak up, but I'm going to go around the room.
Yeah, we can hear you, John, but you can't hear us.
Do you hear me, Thad?
Yes.
Okay. Hello, Mark. How are you? How was your class tonight? Oh, good. The meditation method, do you have any difficulty with it? It's pretty simple and straightforward.
All the time.
You did, okay. Did you, excuse me. Were you able to recognize when you're caught up in your thoughts and you came back to the sensation of breathing? That's the meditation method. And like I said, it really doesn't matter how many times you have to do that, but the more you do it, engage in the method consistently, that will increase. And as you continue to incorporate the rest of the things that we talk about, it will help support your deepening concentration. Any questions or comments about what we've done?
No, I'm kind of just reflecting on all the circles in the pond.
Yeah, it's a lot of information at first, and it does take a little bit of time. But once you understand the context that we're talking about and you hear it a little bit, it becomes kind of second nature. Welcome to our sangha. Glad you're here. Good morning, Helen. Good morning. Good evening, Helen.
Good evening, John. I just appreciate all the wisdom of the Eightfold Path, and realize when I'm not practicing it, which I guess is, part of knowing that you're practicing it.
Glad you're here tonight.
Thank you.
Hello, Lorna.
Hi, John. I think the concentration factors are difficult because that's what breaks up your conditioned thinking, and it's hard sometimes to push or muscle your conditioned thinking out of your mind. You want to sort of get engrossed in it and live in it, and it's hard to muscle it out of your mind, but that's the practice. But I sometimes think what helps me diminish my conditioned thinking is that there's always impermanence. And I know I've been having conditioned thinking for 6 decades of my life. And they've all been impermanent, all of them, every one of them. Which you can see on your cushion when you do quiet your mind and get rid of your conditioned thinking. So I think impermanence supports the concentration factors. And if you can't muscle it out of your mind, you can't muscle your own fabrications out of your mind, you at least know they will go out of your mind. It might take 10 minutes, it might take half a day, it might be next week, whatever you're going through, but they will go. And that sort of like helps me helps me just keep things in balance a little bit. Helps me keep seeing things the right way. That it's just a present condition of my mind.
Yeah.
So if that helps.
That helps a lot.
That's what I do.
Thank you. May I ask you what you mean by muscling? What muscles are you using?
Well, you just don't, when you realize you're in conditioned thinking and you're focusing on yourself, and as well, it's difficult for me to think outside of that and think in terms of right view. I want to remain in wrong view because that's where my mind wants to settle and fabricate and.
That's where the fun is.
You got it. So it takes a lot of effort, and it takes a lot of deep thinking.
Right effort.
Well, right effort, or deep thinking and determination. It takes all that stuff to sort of hack through, your own conditioned thinking, as I say. But as I say, just that underlying notion, underlying understanding that it's temporary. It's just happening right now. It's impermanent. That gives me a little help that it just helps me understand the whole thing. That's all I can say.
Thank you. What I was hoping to get you to say. I was coercing you into using that word effort, because that's what it is. It's right effort. So, thank you. Hello, Ram.
Hello, John. I was just sitting here watching you teach. And,
Watching me teach?
watching you teach. And
Aren't you?
just, now that I've done like this tiny bit of teaching myself, it's awesome.
It is. I mean, it's amazing, isn't it?
I'm not trying to butter you up, but it's just,
I kind of think that someone like me could actually be teaching.
yeah, to watch you pull all that just together, in real time.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not trying to be what's the word? I can't think of it.
Cute.
Falsely modest. I'm not. But I've done this. I can't remember how many times I've done this. Twice a week for 9, 10 years. How many? Wow, that's a lot of teaching twice. That's 100, 700, this is 700,
No, it
800.
used to be more, right?
That's right, it used to be-
Tuesday and Thursday.
That's over 1,000. I'm done. I'm going to spring training. You taught that little bit, and yet you had, all of you, again, it was remarkable watching it. You had, all of you had such inner poise, and it's only going to increase as you go. I can't wait to hear you start teaching again, but not too soon, because I'm.
I have to say, the process was just wonderful to actually engage in that. And you know, I went into it because I have known for a long time, if you want to really grasp something, you're just spinning in circles until you start writing on it, and teaching it. And yes, it does work that way.
It does, yeah.
And that little thing that I said about realizing that when in the original sangha, when the bhikkhus went out for their morning meal, they would teach a little Dhamma, you know, in return for what they would get.
Yeah.
And I'd always thought that was just, you know, kind of an exchange. Not until a couple of days ago that I realized that it was for their benefits as much as for the villagers' benefits. You know, so that they had to get a better grasp on their understanding.
Yeah, you have to. The reason why if you read the Truth to Happiness book, at the end of each chapter, it says, write a paragraph or two about what you learned. The reason why it's in there, and I'm encouraging all of you to continue to do it or start even now, is that you use a different part of your brain, and just writing it out, you're going to learn something that you didn't see there before. And then if you have the opportunity to talk about it like we have right now, again, you're using a different part of your brain, and you're learning it in a different way. And it's just that way. There was something else I want to touch on. I'll think about it. I'm going to go to the back row so we can get over to Frank, because Frank's got to get going soon. Mike, what do you think of tonight's class, and how was your meditation?
Meditation was solid. I shocked myself in a sense of being able to kind of stay with the breath, and my mind has been a little wandering in the last 2 weeks. Some life things going on, but I enjoyed the class. I think I'm understanding some terminology, and I don't pick up exactly what when you reference something as quick as that. I'm kind of like it's like translating if you're speaking another language, and I have to go between the two. But I think the fundamental idea of what you're talking about is something that I've been practicing for a little bit of time. The importance of impermanence with your thoughts and your mind, and just life in general. How it shifts and it changes, and we can fight against it, or we can kind of just get acceptance and peace with it. And then the whole clinging and craving idea. I understand, and I like what you're saying about that, but I think in my life, from my experience with things, like I can cling and crave anything, and that includes like practicing the Four Noble Truths, or become obsessive in a manner that's unhealthy, right? So that was cool. It was eye-opening, and I appreciate it. Thank you all for inviting me in, and thanks for your teaching.
Thank you, Mike. Welcome to our sangha. When the teachings are followed and the structure of the Eightfold Path is maintained, it overcomes any kind of danger in looking at craving and clinging. And that's another reason why I talk about being gentle with ourselves. We don't do anything in the Dhamma, or let go of anything in the Dhamma, that we're not ready to let go of. It is a very, very gentle practice, and there's nothing that, again, when it's practiced correctly, and that means practicing the authentic Dhamma, and also being part of a well-focused sangha. That's so important. I've had many students that really did lose their mind in a spiritual practice because they were getting into things that had no business, or they were, over the years, I've probably gotten 15 or 20 calls from people practicing mind only, meaning just meditation. And they literally did think themselves into a pretty disturbing state, because you don't have any, if you're pretty close to begin with, And all you're doing is sitting and regurgitating these thoughts, which is what you do in meditation if you don't have a structure. You're just building up your own delusion, and you can end up pretty messed up. So the Eightfold Path provides a structure to avoid all of that. So, but thank you for bringing it up, Michael. Frank, good to see you.
Good to be here. Good to see everybody. I don't know. I think lately, looking at the Eightfold Path as a cohesive unit where one supports the other, lately that's been very apparent to me, because without right effort, I can't practice right intention. Without right intention, I can't have the fruition of right speech. And if I'm not practicing right speech, then my action isn't where it should be. And right livelihood, and I don't know, it's just all kind of an integrative path that's just all supporting where I'm at. And when I first entered into Dhamma practice, I guess when I really committed to wholeheartedly practicing the Dhamma, and I had the benefits of or cessation of stress and suffering in my life, and I started to really appreciate the practice, those moments in my life where I'm caught up in wrong speech or wrong action, it's almost like I'm coming back home to the Dhamma practice for relief. And it's feeling more comfortable to live in that space than it ever was before.
That's amazing. Do you remember, and I'm not asking for the date and time, but in general, when you decided to wholeheartedly engage with the Eightfold Path?
It was a necessity for me, because I couldn't even put a finger on it. I'm going to say right about when people started dying in my life.
Yeah. And that was, I remember the first incident was about 8 months into practice, wasn't it? Yeah. Thank you. I didn't mean to bring up a painful situation, but that's...
It's all good. It got me through it.
Yeah. Thank you, Frank. Glad you made it tonight. Eric, how are you tonight? How's your Dhamma practice?
Good. It's good to be here. I don't think I have anything to add. I don't know. I just felt like very calm recently.
Yeah. Isn't that nice?
I don't know. I just really understand what we're going through.
I was going to say, this time through the course, it seems like you're really getting some powerful insight. Yeah. Good for you. Glad you made it tonight. Hello, Russ. Good to see you.
Good to be here. Get here when I can.
Yeah.
And I too am amazed by your teaching. By the way. No, it's how you tie it all together, and just the Eightfold Path as the structure is really great, because it's always something to reference, no matter what you find yourself in.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Thank you, Russ. We touched on this quite a bit over the weekend, because there was a lot of how wonderful I am is going around, and I am. But I wasn't always so wonderful. I really wasn't, and I'm only wonderful today because of the Dhamma. I mean, it's true. The Dhamma, when practiced as intended, it makes us a human being, and being a human being is pretty good. In fact, I would say being a human being is wonderful. My problem is I never knew what it meant to be a human being until I came across the Dhamma. And again, I accept the fact I'm a much better person today than I was not all that long ago. But you all are too. That's the point of the Dhamma. If I wasn't Mr. Wonderful, there'd be no reason to sit here and listen to me, would there? I mean, really? I'm just another person misleading you into another miserable moment. Really? I mean, I'm not. It's true. It's funny too. But there's a lot of people being listened to that lead other people into another miserable moment. We don't have to do that and again, it's not because, all right, I'm probably the world's greatest person, but again, it's only because of the Dhamma. This is how the Dhamma works, and it's remarkable. How are you, Mike? Well,
Hi, John. How are you?
good to see you guys. Thanks for taking the ride up. I hope I see you again next week. Safe ride home. Nice to meet you, Mike.
Nice to meet you.
Hello, Mike.
Hi, John. I just brought this up, this stream of consciousness kind of thing. I really think the quality of our mind has a lot to do with our conditioned thinking and our reaction to what is occurring moment by moment. So that quality of mind, if you monitor that, our quality of mind, it's, if you just like, if you become introspective, like in your day, you can realize like different times that your mind is a lesser or better quality. You're like less stressed, or you're just more of a peaceful abiding occurring. Well, that's what happens to me anyhow. So like, I think that quality of mind and the amount of, a lot of it has to do with the amount of discord and distraction that exists in your environment. It's very important to, it's hard to be, peaceful and tranquil when there's so much discord and distractions in your lives. It doesn't allow you to find that peace, going back to the breath, is where we kind of remove ourselves from that moment, and we can just like touch that calmness or that peace that we can cultivate through jhana. So again, like the emphasis is like refining our concentration, and our technique, our meditation technique, so that we have this foundation to call upon and access quickly. And again, eliminating discord and distraction, I think, or slowing down life when you need, for it to slow down, because you can't function as well as you would like because of distractions and the discord that exists because of them. Basically, that's it.
Thank you, Michael. It's remarkable that you're able to, after a relatively short, you've been practicing about 6-8 months, something like that. Excuse me. You're able to notice the ever-changing nature of the fourth foundation of mindfulness and the quality of your mind, and notice this significant difference in those qualities of mind. Meaning, it's just not one ongoing aspect of conditioned thinking. You're seeing it there. That's really profound. Thank you. Hello, Julia. Glad you guys are both better.
Well, thank you, John. Yeah, thank you. I was gonna say, this is kind of like self-referential to being sick again, but right effort is also when you have like high fever and you remind yourself that you have to do jhana.
Yeah.
You try, even if you can't sit up, you lie down and do it. There was a couple of times this past few days where, well, like a week ago, where it was very difficult, and it's distracting, being feverish and your body hurting and all these aches and pains, but still you try to meditate,
Yep.
So there were a couple of times where I actually had to just do it lying down, and of course, naturally, when you lie down, you naturally fall into deeper sleep. But sometimes I think maybe that even though that you didn't complete the whole task of the whole jhana meditation, you still had, well, I felt like I had the right effort to try to meditate.
Oh, yeah.
Like, even though I felt like I was at like death's door. But it was, and I actually opened my book too and read the chapter, which was really difficult also. But you try. So right effort is not only in jhana meditation, but it's also in daily living.
Yes.
Like getting up to actually have the discipline to do your program no matter what.
Yep. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, right effort is not just on our cushion. It's our whole practice. And thank you, Julie. When you're sick, you do the best. I mean, all the time you do the best you can. And when you're really sick, you do the best you can. And sometimes the best you can is no practice at all. And then there's tomorrow. You pick it up again. Thank you. Hello, Kate. How are you? Good to see you.
Yeah, so much of what you said tonight, I feel like I needed to hear again. And I've been in those places that you described 100 times, and just the notion that all I need to do to sort of interrupt that is take a breath is very comforting to me, because it's easier than trying to think my way out of a lot of that stuff. So just like the interruption that is provided is really good. And right effort for me, like, took a while to come around, I feel like, in this practice. Like, what Frank said last week about he didn't think he had to do anything at first. He thought he could just like come to class, learn the verbiage, I did that for a while. I didn't think I had to do anything either. I thought I could just keep coming here and keep letting it absorb, and I didn't really have to apply it. And it's like when you make that shift to like apply it is when you notice the difference, I feel like. I don't know, but it takes a while to get there, I think. And right effort just always makes me feel like I can always just start again with right effort. Like if I didn't do that great with it today, I can just start again.
Absolutely.
And that's, again, like another comforting thing that I just always come back to. So.
Thank you, kid. That's so important. Yeah, I mean, if today wasn't a good day in the Dhamma, there's always the next moment. And it's kind of like what we're talking about. And all you can do is the best you can in this moment. But in this moment, the most important thing is, as described by right effort, is to keep the structure of the Eightfold Path. And then it develops. I don't know that it was all that long. It's a very common thing to come to the Buddha's Dhamma, especially if we've had been involved in other religions, because they're based on beliefs. In other words, as long as you're a true believer, I mean, that's how I can think of 8 different religions that were presented to me that way. As long as I believe it, as long as I have the right faith, I'll get my reward in the end. And that's how all religions basically have that component. They were the same religions that were around during the Buddha's time, had those same components. The Buddha didn't see himself as a savior. He didn't teach a salvific religion. He taught a way to live a human life right here, right now. It has nothing to do with religion, has nothing to do with salvation. It simply has to do with becoming a human being. And at some point, you go, what Kate just described is you go from this intellectual experience thinking that just showing up is going to be enough, like we do in most religions, as long as you have the faith, to actually having to do the work. But as soon as you started doing the work, actually doing it, you reaped the benefits pretty quickly, didn't you?
Yeah, and that builds on itself. Once you start seeing the benefits, then you go like, oh, okay, I have to do it this way. And then it's like a snowball effect, I feel like. But but yeah, there is like a inflection point, I feel like, that you need to hit where you just actually do apply it versus like I was treating this as a memory exercise at first, and it wasn't as effective.
Ehepasika, you came and you saw for yourself, and that made all the difference. But that's true for all of us. It has to be experienced. There's nothing conceptual about this, and there's nothing abstract about what the Buddha taught. Thank you, Kate. Hello, Tim.
Hello, greetings, everybody. So, adding up to what Michael and Kit said, and this wonderful class teaching today. This weekend I spent every single night, all night, out with my telescope by myself. And so I was able to reflect upon the Dhamma and the teachings quite a bit. And I tried, and I think I succeeded in applying the Eightfold Path as best as I could with these thoughts coming in and out. And I just thought there were two things that came to mind. And one was, and again, I have to kind of revise these, but I just figured I'd share them. They're quick. And this kind of goes on to what you were talking about today, which is kind of profound in a way. So I think I was on the right path. The self-referential view creates a unique self created from impermanent phenomena. This kind of gets dark. Mortality causes agitation, sadness, and dukkha. We all die. It is foolish to obsess about it. Acceptance of our mortality is liberating.
Yeah, it is.
I don't know why I thought of this, but I did. And this probably has to do a lot with my work. But when confronted by an agitated person, be compassionate, do not take it personally, do not react. Instead, understand.
Great advice.
Be still, calm, and the agitation will likely diffuse.
Yeah.
And finally, and this is, I want to stress that this is with dispassionate observation, because I think I was on the fence to say this because it almost seems like I'm analyzing something. But in retrospect, I really do believe I was dispassionate when I wrote this, when I thought of this. And this ties into what Michael was saying, I think. Reducing entanglements, stressful environments, events, people, crowds, noise. Having a quiet surrounding with these reductions can allow a more profound development of concentration. Not being judgmental and not having unrealistic expectations with regards to the Dhamma can help us achieve and live a better life in the development of the Dhamma. Now, I know it might sound like it's being analytical, but, and I'm trying to be dispassionate about it, but I just think by consciously reducing the amount of entanglements that we face can be helpful.
It's the essence of the Dhamma.
It isn't though, because shouldn't we be able to deal with them?
Well, yeah, the point is to deal with them how? Are you taking it personally or not? If you're not taking it personally, you're free of entanglement. It doesn't mean we're not living in a world. It simply means we're not taking these things personally. Well, but that naturally quiets down too. I mean, the things that I have to deal with in the world is greatly diminished by my own choice. I simply, and all of you, I bet, and including you, Tim, have diminished your entanglements in the world. You've made decisions about things you want to be involved in now that, or things that you don't want to be involved in now that you used to think were important or at least wanted to do. That's the practical applications of minimizing entanglement. I mean, the things that I do in the world are what's necessary for me to live in the world, but not much else. You know, I mean, and then getting back to what you're talking about, it is just that. And you're not, I don't see you over analyzing anything. I think you're describing your Dhamma practice perfectly. The other thing that I would bring up to you is, are you bringing your telescope to retreat? Because there's some light pollution, but it's an amazing sky up there.
I think that would be distracting.
Yeah, I would say.
There is downtime for it.
Yeah, we have downtime. I think
Yeah.
it was a pretty amazing sky. We'll see.
Give it some thought.
It wouldn't be too distracting, I don't think. Well, maybe. You know yourself better than I do. Hello, Mary.
Oh, well, or save it for Saturday night.
Save it for Saturday night, yeah. We have our Saturday night social. We could all.
You know, chocolates and giggles. We could have stars too.
That'd be great.
So it's been a very good class. I remember talking about quality of mind, or many weeks ago that was, and I think and I was thinking about what Lorna was saying, that the rigor that comes into it is, you think at first it's, oh, I need to sit twice a day and I need to, try to sit for longer periods of time to expand my concentration. But the rigor is in integrating it in your life, off the cushion, and not just looking at the practice as like a go-to solution, but already something that's already there and present
Yes.
with you. Like when we all first start out, we feel like it's something there when I need it, right? And that's helpful. That's part of Hekasika. Oh, wow, look, I recalled this, whatever, and it's helping me in this situation. But it's really integrating it and observing yourself navigating through spaces or things that would have been entanglements before, and observing yourself not being entangled, and feeling the maturity of that, the sort of emotional maturity. The other thing I was thinking about, listening to Eric, and not to sound so much older, but for such a young man to have stumbled upon this, what good fortune in the path of, human maturity for a young man. I guess he's in his 20s or whatever, right?
Yeah.
I mean, all of us that are realizing it wherever we are right now, in our lives, I just thought, what's such a gift that Frank has shared with his son and the other people he's brought to class. So, it's really something. So I find also the rigor is, for me, just sometimes the entanglements are in my work. I find I'm able to navigate through most parts of my life. And, it's when I'm dealing with other people and many, many other people and tugging priorities and all of those things. But I can honestly say that, most days I'm, incredibly better off for having the practice and seeing it come to life every day, than I was when I first came here. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary. Hello, David.
Thank you. Thank you for your teaching.
Glad you made it tonight. It's good, always good to see you. Amy, how are you? How was your first class with us?
I'm feeling very appreciative. Thank you very much. I'm very glad to be here, and I'm just absorbing it and holding on to your teachings, but also the rest of the wisdom within the room and the sharing from everybody. I think the thing that I'm holding on to as like my key take home or whatever was the be gentle to yourself.
Yes.
I think a lot of us demand a lot of ourselves, including me. And I was also really struck by some of the things that were said, and I think about how much my 8-year-old practices better than I do. And how she tells me all the time, Mommy, breathe. I get sad. And also her ability to make artwork and have a sense of impermanence with it and just like tear it up and start again. And how much I still have to just sit back and watch and not try and, with her and other people in my life, try and make things the way I think they're supposed to be, that I have to be gentle with myself. But I really appreciate it. I really do appreciate being here and appreciate meditating again. It's been a while. And it was a lovely meditation. Lovely teaching. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy, and welcome to our sangha as well. On our website, becoming-buddha.com, have either of you or both of you been to the website?
Yeah, Anna sent it.
Oh, okay, good. So on there is a series of guided meditations from 5 minutes to 45 minutes. Since you're just reinvigorating your meditation practice, start with 5 or 10 minutes. And if you can do that twice a day consistently, you'll be right back in it. Mark, it sounds like you've been meditating longer, but whatever you're comfortable with. But the guided meditations are almost exactly what the guidance that you heard here tonight, the same verbiage. Beyond that, we're in the middle of this structured study. If you go on the webpage and scroll down, you'll see, I think, 2020 Truth of Happiness Sangha Study, something like that. If you click on that, it'll take you to all the past talks that we've given so far if you want to catch up. But I encourage you to be a part of our Sangha, and I hope you join us again. Anna, how are you? Thank you for bringing your friends.
Oh, I am just, I feel like a teenager falling in love because I'm like in awe.
I feel like that with your food. So.
Yeah, I think that's right food.
The ninth factor. Anna's food. There's right view, right intention, Anna's food, right speech, right? Right spices.
It might deter some people from meditating because of the spiciness. But then,
No.
I'm just in awe of you, every one of you. It's just, this is my third class, but I feel like I was always here for some reason. And I don't know if you saw the movie Moonstruck,
Oh, well,
where Cher says, "Snap out of it." I
Snap
out of it.
Yeah. Never seen it. Never seen it.
Oh, the Cosmos Moon is my favorite.
You were my Cher, telling me, and pushing me off the cliff, and I am just swimming back. But it feels like home, and I just feel like the home is always in me and never left. And it's not something as tangible or constructive as physicalness. And I feel full and empty at the same time. And I need to stop, and I need to stop the reactionary part of my life. And to echo what Amy said, I have a 5-year-old daughter, and I nicknamed her my boss baby, but now I am convinced she's my teacher, because she's my me, and when she's pushing the buttons, I am breathing and I smile. And it's one of those, and I catch myself, and I said this before, catch myself smiling, and there's this tingling sensation. It's almost like the opposite of eye making, and I am trying to understand the definition of what it is to be unskillful and skillful desire. And I would love it if you could clarify or expand on the unskillful and skillful desire, because I want to understand both.
Oh.
And to accept both of them as they are.
Yes.
And yeah.
Thank you, Anna. Skillful is everything that's framed by the Eightfold Path, and unskillful is everything else. And again, it doesn't mean that anything that's outside of the Eightfold Path is evil or bad or shouldn't be a part of the world. It simply means that I use the Eightfold Path as my framework for ongoing right view, how I see myself in relation to the world. And again, what is skillful is what maintains the selflessness of right view. And what is unskillful is grasping after, or anything, any entanglement in the world could be considered unskillful, or anything that is distracting away from the Dhamma. including, and most importantly, false dharmas or fabricated teachings. And as your third class, but I think you see the simplicity of the teachings. That doesn't mean that they're easy or they're instantly applied, but the Eightfold Path is basically a very simple path. It just takes what we talked about here. It takes continued right effort. It takes the right application of mindfulness, not just this broad modern mindfulness, and it takes a true concentration practice, and then it just falls into place. So thank you. Great class, everyone. There was one other thing I was going to mention, but I can't think about it, so probably doesn't need to be mentioned. So, Jane, do you have anything to say? I'm not sure why you're not able to.
Do you hear me, John?
What does that say? Jane, Jane, Jane. Hello, Jane. Hello, Thad.
Yeah, John, we can hear you and we have our
No?
mics unmuted, but you're not getting us.
I know what the problem is. Yeah. What happened here? That damn dog. Hello, Jane.
John?
Hey, there you are. I thought along with losing my sight, I was losing my hearing too. How are you, Jane?
I'm fine. Great class.
Thank you. I'm glad I got to hear that. So, all right, I'm glad you joined us tonight, Jane. How are you, Thad?
I'm fine, John. Thank you. Yeah, good, great class. I'm going to try to practice a little bit of right speech and maybe not say anything tonight. Just listen.
That's noble silence. So,
right.
Thank you, Thad. I'll take a look at what you sent me, and we'll talk maybe tomorrow evening.
I won't be able to call you tomorrow evening because I'm going to be driving out of town, but okay. Maybe next week we'll do it. Email's great, though.
All right. Will do. All right. Thank you. All right. We'll finish with metta as we always do. These are the Buddha's words on metta from the Karaniya Metta Sutta. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties, and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm and wise and skillful, not proud or demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove. Wishing, in gladness and in safety, may all beings be at ease. Let none despise another. Oh, I'm sorry. May all beings be at ease, whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short, or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born. May all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings. Radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will. Whether standing or walking, seated or lying down, free from drowsiness, one should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding. By not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into this world. Thank you all for a wonderful class tonight. Peace. Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Thad.
Thanks, John. Have a good week.
You too.
Thanks, John.
See you, Thad. I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, we'll do.